stimulates the production and activity of osteoclasts to dissolve bone, which is bone resorption. Yeah.
Just to clarify, calcium trial is active vitamin D, and that's a parathyroid hormone, or parathyroid hormone activates?
Parathyroid hormone stimulates the production of active vitamin D.
Okay.
So most vitamin D in the body is in the inactive form, which is cholecalciferol or vitamin D3. And so when you have low blood calcium, parathyroid hormone is going to be released, and it's going to cause that inactive vitamin D form to be activated to make calcitriol. Calcitriol is the active vitamin D. Cholecalciferol is the inactive vitamin D. I don't care if you remember that name, but it's the inactive form of vitamin D. Calcitriol, I do want you to know this name, is the active vitamin D form. And parathyroid hormone stimulates its production from inactive vitamin D.
That was the scientific name for the vitamin.
Yes, the scientific name for active vitamin D is calcitriol, and the other one is 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. Dihydroxycholecalciferol. It's a long name. Calciferol.
Dr. Farley,
It's just another scientific name for it.
did you say that calbindin is a transporter of calcium into the blood?
Calbindin is just a calcium transporter. So calcium, to transport calcium from the gut into the body, you need calbindin. To reabsorb it in the kidneys, you need calbindin. Calbindin is just a calcium transporter, and that's what vitamin D creates. Because remember how vitamin D works. It goes into the nucleus and turns on gene regulation, so gene transcription, and one of the things it turns on is the expression of calbindin. And it's just a calcium transporter, so you can absorb it in the gut, absorb it in the kidneys. It'll also do something in bone, but we're not going to talk about that. But yeah, calbindin is the calcium transporter.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, we good? Magnesium. Magnesium is another mineral in bone. So we do have it in bone. I don't care if you remember what percent it is, but it's found in bone. A lot of it is found in bone. But there is quite a bit in soft tissues and your fluids because it has some really important functions. It is a cofactor for, oh, by the way, if I say coenzyme, we're talking about a vitamin. So remember, a lot of your B vitamins, are a lot of your B vitamins are coenzymes. If I say cofactor means it's a mineral that helps function of enzymes. So cofactors are minerals that allow an enzyme to be functional. Coenzymes are vitamins that allow an enzyme to be functional. So we just separate minerals versus vitamins. Vitamins are coenzymes, minerals are cofactors. But both of them are really going to be important for activating certain enzymes. So when I say cofactor, it's kind of like a coenzyme. The only difference is that this is a mineral, so we call it a cofactor, not a coenzyme. If I were talking about vitamin B12 or B1, then that would be a coenzyme instead of a cofactor. Okay. So this is a cofactor, meaning the enzymes that need magnesium will not work unless magnesium is bound. And in this case, it's extremely important for these guys, kinases. Kinases need to phosphorylate things, and especially ATP. So you cannot use ATP unless you have magnesium. So that just tells you it's really important. ATP is the energy currency of the cell, and you can't use ATP unless you have magnesium. So that is one function of magnesium. It's required for the use of ATP. And what uses ATP is mostly the enzymes that are kinases. Yeah. It's in a lot of a variety of foods. I don't think I have the foods on here, but most of these are in magnesium. I don't remember, but I think it's in a variety of foods. Yeah, sorry. I don't remember all the foods for some of these. But yeah, I know that most of these are found in a variety of foods. A lot of fruits will have minerals. Yeah. All right, so with this one, so its function also is in, well, I shouldn't say its function. There you go. Good reason to eat mashed potatoes. All right, so that's its main function, is a cofactor in many enzymes, and these enzymes are kinases. So kinases, especially those that, so kinases need to phosphorylate things and includes ATP. So kinases are going to be using ATP, and they need magnesium for that to work. So that's its function. Now we're going to talk about these things, its toxicities and deficiencies, which are actually really interesting. I don't think I have another slide on this. So I do want you to remember hypomagnesemia versus hypermagnesemia. So hypo means low magnesium. Low magnesium will actually cause a lot of neuromuscular irritability and cardiac arrhythmia. Essentially, it affects the function of your heart and your blood vessels. And that's because it can interact or affect levels of calcium. So because of it will interact or inhibit calcium, then it will have effect on your blood vessels, which means it's going to affect your blood pressure, and it'll also affect cardiac arrhythmia. So essentially your heartbeat can be affected because magnesium will affect calcium, and calcium affects those things. And so if you do not have enough magnesium, then you'll have neuromuscular irritability, cardiac arrhythmia. So essentially, it's going to affect your heart. That's what neuromuscular irritability means. It's going to affect your heart. It'll affect your skeletal muscle too, but in this case, you're more concerned about your heart functioning than your skeletal muscle. And then too much hypermagnesium, this is the really interesting part of magnesium, it can cause hypotension. Hypotension related to, again, it will affect calcium as well as phosphorus. Calcium as well as potassium. And again, calcium and potassium are really important for neural signaling in the heart. And the interesting thing is that it will be used to treat preeclampsia. So preeclampsia is, HTN stands for hypertension, and hypertension during pregnancy is called preeclampsia. And so many physicians will prescribe magnesium to treat hypertension in pregnant women. So it'll be treating preeclampsia because it causes hypotension. And again, hypotension is related to the fact that it will affect potassium and calcium, and also because magnesium on its own can actually prevent calcium or affect calcium when it's contracting smooth muscle, which is in your vascular system. So vascular smooth muscles, that's what's going to dilate and contract your smooth muscles in your blood vessels. So if you contract your blood vessels, that's going to cause high blood pressure. And that's what calcium is going to cause you to do. Calcium is stimulating contraction. Magnesium will inhibit calcium from causing that contraction, and that'll cause dilation of your blood vessels. When you dilate your blood vessels, that causes hypotension. Essentially, it's going to be useful for treating hypertension. I don't know why they don't use it for other people who have hypertension in general, but I know they use it for preeclampsia. So women with preeclampsia, hypertension during pregnancy, oftentimes it's treated by giving them high levels of magnesium. You don't have to know why, I'm telling you why or how it's happening. You don't have to know the mechanism, but you do need to know the toxicity, cardiac arrhythmia, the deficiency, hypotension, and it's used to treat preeclampsia because it can cause hypotension. Yes?
For the magnesium, for the kinases, do you just want us to know that
So I want you to know that it's needed in a variety of enzymes, particularly kinases, which move phosphate groups. So you can't break down ATP, for example. ATP is going to so I want you to know ATP requires magnesium, and I want you to know that a lot of enzymes do, particularly kinases, if I were to keep it that simple. So a lot of enzymes, more specifically kinases, and definitely when you're breaking down ATP, you've got to have magnesium or you can't break down ATP. Yeah.
Hypotension deficiency, and what did you say for toxicity?
So toxicity is hypotension. And I shouldn't say toxic, yeah, too much magnesium can cause hypotension, which could be fatal. Too little magnesium can affect your heart and cause cardiac arrhythmia. So yeah, you just mixed them up. And so it's the hypermagnesium that is going to be used, so high levels of magnesium that's going to be used to treat preeclampsia. That's what's going to cause hypotension. All right, I think I've spent too much time. I don't want to confuse you guys even more. All right. All right, phosphorus. Again, function. Well, where do we find it? So it is in bone too. It's going to actually be, along with calcium in bone, it forms hydroxyapatite. So most phosphorus you're going to find in bone. The rest of it, super important. So these functions you should already know because we've already talked about this to death in biochemistry. We need phospholipids. What's on phospholipids? Phosphate groups. PO4. What's this P? It's phosphorus. So phospholipids cannot be made without phosphorus. Nucleic acids also have phosphate groups. They need a phosphorus. So that's just structural. You can't make DNA and you can't make phospholipids unless you have phosphorus because that's a major component in phosphate. So this is just a phosphate here. You got to have phosphorus to make phosphate. But also energy metabolism, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Again, more phosphate groups. Creatine phosphate. So these are just examples of some of the things we need phosphorus for. But it's mostly related to phosphate groups. Except when it comes to bone, that's where it binds to calcium and you make hydroxyapatite. So you also need to make strong bones, you need phosphorus too. Because calcium and phosphorus come together to make hydroxyapatite in bone. The rest of this should be stuff that you kind of intuitively, or not intuitively, but you've been learning in biochemistry. Phosphate groups have a wide variety of roles. Deficiency is rare. Again, this one's found in a wide variety of foods. A lot of plants, again, a lot of plant foods. If you have too much or too little, it really is going to, too little hypophosphatemia, too little phosphorus, you're going to have muscle weakness related to that. But again, you don't really see it. It's super rare. Your body will also hold on to it. Hyperphosphatemia, this one is more common. And that's because people who have kidney failure or any issues with their kidneys tend to not be able to excrete excess phosphorus. And that can result in calcification of soft tissue. So it has the same toxicity as excess calcium. So hyperphosphatemia, hypercalcitemia, these are all just, when you elevate calcium or elevate phosphorus in your body, then that could lead to calcification of soft tissues. Right, next one, sodium. Sodium is a major electrolyte outside of cells. So here's a cell. Sodium is really high outside of cells. You have a little bit inside, but most sodium is found outside of cells. So it's going to be really important for maintaining, to maintain membrane potential. Sorry, I'm going to skip back to that other slide. To maintain membrane potential, your body just generates electricity. And one of the ways it can generate electricity is by making these gradients. So you're gonna have more sodium, sorry, it's like I created two cells. You're gonna have more sodium outside of cells than inside. And you're gonna have more potassium inside of cells than outside. So you're gonna have to keep that straight. Potassium inside of cells, sodium outside of cells. That gradient is extremely important. It's extremely important for your neurons. Also your muscles, but especially your neurons. So again, needed for neuron signaling and muscle contraction. That sodium gradient. So in other words, we need it to maintain membrane potential. Are you guys learning about neurons yet? Okay.
Sure.
So neuron signaling, muscle contraction. The other reason you need sodium, because I can go over this, we just don't have a lot of time. So the other important part of sodium is water balance. So sodium levels are maintained by your kidneys. Basically, wherever sodium goes, water follows. And so sodium is going to be maintained by your kidney. It'll increase or decrease sodium excretion as needed. You will lose some in your stool and then some in your sweat, but mostly it's going to be maintained by your kidneys. And it will also affect your hydration status, which we're going to talk about in a second here. So maintaining water balance. But here's the membrane potential first. So again, there's a lot more sodium outside of cells than inside, and that's going to be maintained by this sodium-potassium ATP pump. So you pump 3 sodiums out, means you can bring 2 sodiums in, and that's going to help you maintain this concentration gradient of a lot of sodium outside of cells and a lot of potassium inside of cells. And this gradient is really important for neural signaling. All right, so in relation to its water, like the water balancing thing, if you have a sodium deficiency, which is extremely rare, especially in the United States, but it can happen if you drink excessive water. So I should say it is rare unless you drink too much water. So when we do see this, especially in the South, it gets really hot in the summertime. I'm going to tell you why Gatorade was named. Essentially, you would have these football players out there training in the middle of spring and summer, losing a bunch of sodium. Well, the sport nutritionist or teams, sport physiologist on the teams, they wouldn't be able to necessarily tell if someone was just dehydrated or if someone were losing electrolytes. And so they would get these football players to just keep drinking water sometimes. And if you drink too much water too fast, you will dilute your sodium, your brain will swell, and you will die. And that occasionally happens. We will lose people from drinking too much water in the heat, especially in Georgia and Florida, and that's why the Florida Gators came up with the Gatorade. So instead of having their football players while they were training drinking water, they would switch them to an electrolyte drink. And that was many years ago. Nowadays, electrolyte drinks are really common. We drink them even when we don't need them. You really only need them if you are exercising more than an hour and sweating a lot, then you should drink an electrolyte. But if you're just exercising 30 minutes, you should really be drinking water. You don't need to drink electrolytes. There's lots of reasons to drink lots of water. But excess water will cause water toxicity, which is hyponatremia. So hyponatremia is caused by water toxicity. It also was a hazing incident. This has been a couple of times. So students at these sororities, fraternities, some of them would stop hazing with alcohol, and this one group started hazing with water. And they would have the pledges drink a ton of water, and some poor kid died because he ended up with water toxicity because he was pledging to some fraternity. So it happens because you just drink too much water. All right, so that's hyponatremia, hypernatremia, excess sodium, also rare. We don't really see a problem, but it is associated with high blood pressure. So excess sodium in your diet is associated with high blood pressure. And so that's why we tell people if you have high blood pressure or hypertension, avoid high sodium foods. So hypernatremia, too much sodium, rare, unless you have kidney disease. And this is basically because you consume too many chips. But it's not really a problem because your kidneys are really good at excreting excess sodium. But it is associated with hypertension. Hyponatremia, that's water intoxication. Essentially, that dilutes your sodium. Your brain will swell. Water intoxication occurs when too much is consumed in a short period of time. Kidneys don't have time to excrete the excess. So that excess water dilutes the sodium, brain's going to swell, you get fatigue, confusion, and disorientation, which are very similar symptoms to dehydration. And so that's why it's really important, if you are exercising, especially in the heat, over an hour, you should really be replacing sodium, not just drinking water. So it can lead to coma, death. Consuming a sports drink will help avoid hyponatremia, aka water intoxication. All right, questions about sodium? All right, potassium. Potassium is the major electrolyte inside a cell. So again, sodium outside, major electrolyte outside, potassium, major electrolyte inside. And it's important, just like sodium, for fluid balance and also maintaining membrane potential. And that allows your neurons to work. So needed for neural signaling and also your heart contraction. So potassium is going to be more important for heart contraction. And we're going to see this when we get to, I do have food sources on this. A lot of foods have potassium. Don't have to memorize them though. But the potassium is going to be really important for the heart. And I'm going to tell you why. Now when we have too much or too low potassium, that will kill your heart. So potassium, K. So K is potassium. So hyperkalemia versus hypokalemia. Both of them are life-threatening, and both of them are going to mess with heart function. So too much or too little potassium, that is something, if you're in the hospital, the nurses, physicians, they're really watching potassium levels. That's kind of the major electrolyte because that will affect your heart because it's really important. Potassium, unlike sodium, sodium's also important. But potassium's important for resting membrane potential. Sodium's important for the action potential, so not as big of a deal if that one fluctuates a little bit. But if potassium fluctuates too much, because it sets the resting membrane potential of the heart, you will die if potassium gets too high or too low. And that's because the heart function will, it'll mess up the membrane potential of the heart, the resting membrane potential, throw your heart out of whack, and potentially be very dangerous very soon. So very life-threatening. Life-threatening. Can occur also with excess vomiting, diarrhea, people with eating disorders. When you have this young individual with an eating disorder die suddenly, it typically is because of excess vomiting or whatever laxatives they might be taking. They lose too much potassium too fast and their heart can't take it. So often, when we see it in younger individuals, it can be related to eating disorders. But it can happen really quickly. That's why potassium is monitored really closely. So too much or too little potassium, major heart problems. Hyper or hypokalemia. All right, we're going to move on to these guys. Those were your major ones. Micro, we're not talking about all of them, but we're going to give you the gist, the big picture of these guys. Functions, toxicities, and deficiencies. Starting with copper. Copper-dependent enzymes. So there's a few things you need copper for. The electron transport chain is one of them, if you remember that from last term. Do you guys remember what complex needed it? Complex 4. But the electron transport chain cannot work without calcium. It also is needed for iron transport and storage. So these are called peroxidases. It actually has iron in the title. Fe is iron. Peroxidases, I don't care if you remember ceruloplasmin or hephaestin, but these are the peroxidases that will allow iron to be put in a state, so it basically needs to be oxidized to the ferrous form, Fe3+, in order to store it or to transport it. So without copper, you can't turn on these peroxidases, which means you can't properly transport or store iron. So copper is needed for the peroxidases, which are for transporting and storing iron, or getting the iron into a state where they can be transported or stored. You also need it for the electron transport chain, like we just said. And this one I probably won't ask you, but you do need it for collagen and neurotransmitter synthesis because enzymes are really, some copper-containing enzymes are required. For example, I think it's epinephrine, norepinephrine, collagen. They need copper. These enzymes that make these guys, collagen and these neurotransmitters, need copper. But this is one I probably won't ask you, but these other two, peroxidases and electron transport chain, up for grabs. This could be on the exam. Toxicity, rare, but we do see toxicities and deficiencies related to genetic disorders. So these two genetic disorders you need to know. Menke syndrome is a copper deficiency. It causes neurological issues, connective tissue abnormalities, and that's related to all the enzymes that require copper. Versus Wilson disease, and this picture up here is Wilson disease. The Kaiser-Fleischer rings are when you have excess copper. What's copper look like? It's got this brown color here. And so you can see if someone has excess copper in their body, it's called in the eye, you can see it, the Kaiser-Fleischer ring. So this person has blue eyes, but excess copper has accumulated in their iris, causing it to turn this brown color. It's called Kaiser-Fleischer rings, and it's an indication of copper overload, which also causes neurological issues, as well as liver disease. Okay, so Menke disease is a copper deficiency. Wilson disease is a copper overload. And Wilson's disease is what causes these Kaiser-Fleischer rings, an excess accumulation of copper in the iris, as well as other places. So whenever you have one of these minerals like copper, it can move electrons, which means it can be dangerous if you have excess amounts. It can really affect a lot of things in your body, especially your nervous system. Anything that can move electrons around can really wreak havoc on your body, especially your neurons.
It's on the next slide.
So these are all the copper-containing enzymes. Don't memorize them. But again, this is showing you it is important in the electron transport chain. Here's the peroxidases. I do want you to know the peroxidases and importance in the electron transport chain and the disease states, the genetic disease states, Menke disease and Wilson's disease. But yeah, peroxidases is the only enzyme name that you need to know. But it is showing you how these other enzymes like melanin, you need it for dopamine, norepinephrine, but I won't ask you about those. All right, any questions about copper, function, efficiency, toxicity? Iron, main function, oxygen transport and hemoglobin. Hoping you guys remember that from last term. So it's a major component of hemoglobin and myoglobin. It is iron that binds to oxygen in these guys. So you cannot move oxygen without iron. Gotta have iron because it's what binds to the oxygen. Also important in electron movement in the electron transport chain. So complex 1, 2, 3 have iron. Complex 4 has copper. So copper and iron are really helpful in facilitating that electron movement in the electron transport chain. They can help move those electrons around. And these two guys, transferrin versus ferritin. Transferrin transports iron. Ferritin stores iron. And this iron is stored in the liver, mainly in the liver. other places as well, but mainly the liver. And where the ferritin is the protein that stores it in the liver. So transferrin transports iron, ferritin stores iron in the liver, and a couple other places. And that is to prevent iron toxicity, because iron is not excreted in the kidneys or the feces. The only way we get rid of iron is through blood. So women tend to be iron deficient or tend to be more commonly iron deficient because of menses. Menstruation every month, losing of blood means you lose iron. Whereas men, they're more likely, or they could get iron overload, which is going to be hemochromatosis. I'll show you that in a second. So let's talk about iron deficiency first. The main result of iron deficiency is anemia. Essentially, anemia just means that you can't effectively transport oxygen. There's lots of things that can cause anemia. One of those is iron. So if you don't have iron, you can't make what? What is it that the major protein that transports oxygen? You can't make hemoglobin. If you can't make hemoglobin, then red blood cells, this is the normal size of red blood cells, these little pink guys are blood cells. If you can't make hemoglobin, then you're going to have small, pale, it's already written here, small, meaning microcytic, pale red blood cells. So this microcytic anemia. Microcytic anemia, that's iron. If you see megaloblastic or macro, so macrocytic, what causes macrocytic anemia? What two vitamins deficiencies can cause macrocytic anemia? Folate and B12. So macrocytic anemia, that's folate and B12. It's also called megaloblastic anemia, or B12 specifically anemia. It's called pernicious anemia. But macrocytic anemia, that's iron. That's iron. Why aren't you working? Come on. Try doing it that way. There we go. So again, not excreted. Once absorbed, very little leaves the body. Most of it's going to be recycled and reused. Iron loss occurs with blood loss. This is also something important to know. Heme iron versus non-heme iron. Heme iron is found in meats, animal products, fish, poultry. It's going to be animal because this is heme comes from hemoglobin. Plants don't have heme. They don't have blood. So they have a non-heme iron form. Yes?
It was like a slide of when you mentioned microcytic anemia. Is there like one of the vitamins that causes microcytic anemia as well?
No. Macrocytic, M-A-C-R-O, macrocytic anemia. That's B12 and folate. So heme iron is very well absorbed. So some vegetarians, I had a friend in college, she was iron deficient often, and she didn't like the iron supplements, and so she switched to start eating meat products because meat products have really good absorption. They use a very specific heme carrier, allowing that iron to be absorbed well. Non-heme iron. This was a function of vitamin C. Vitamin C for non-heme iron will make it more absorbable. So if you are only eating plants, if you have a client that's a vegetarian and they have low iron, then you want to recommend that they take their iron or eat their plant foods to better absorb that iron in plants. Vitamin C will help with that. So vitamin C will help absorb that non-heme iron. And you find it in a lot of variety of plant foods, dark leafy greens, nuts, seeds. So there's a lot of sources for it. It's just not well absorbed. There's a lot of competition. But heme iron is better absorbed, so this is just an easier source for iron if someone tends to have deficiencies. So So common cause of anemia, I think it's the most common cause actually, but it's common cause is not having lack of a good source of iron in the diet. So when iron stores are depleted, hemoglobin levels will decrease. That's why you have microacidic. It's microacidic because the blood cells are really small because they don't have a lot of hemoglobin. You can also lose iron due to an ulcer, like a bleeding ulcer, other blood loss. Infants, children, because in adolescence, these are growing. So anybody that's growing will have a tendency at greater risk of deficiency, but especially women. So these guys are at the greatest risk. And it is the most common nutritional deficiency in the world, iron deficiency. Too much iron. This is rare. It's actually caused by a genetic disorder called hemochromatosis. And so you shouldn't take an iron supplement unless you know you're deficient, quite honestly, because iron itself will act as a free radical. It will cause a lot of damage if you get too much. And that's what happens with hemochromatosis, iron overload. Body keeps absorbing even when iron stores are full, and that can damage a lot of things. So again, it acts as a free radical. It's like bouncing around the room, destroying stuff. Bouncing around the cell, destroying stuff, which can ultimately damage the cell, damage the heart, damage the kidneys, damage the nervous system. Hemochromatosis is dangerous. So how do you treat it? So again, should not supplement unless you have a known diagnosed deficiency. How do you treat hemochromatosis? You essentially give blood on a more regular basis. You just donate blood, and that helps remove that iron from your body. So it's a pretty simple therapy to treat hemochromatosis. Just donate blood. All right, so that's iron toxicity. Acts like a free radical, damages all sorts of organs. Zinc. Keeping this one simple too, involved in more than 100 enzymes. Lots of stuff requires zinc. So DNA synthesis, growth, development, healthy immune system, wound healing, you name it, it's probably going to require zinc. So a lot of enzymes needed, and this is the other thing you need to remember, and it acts as zinc is important for the zinc finger motifs and transcription factors needed for gene regulation. We will talk about that after exam 2 because we're going to talk about DNA and nucleotides and transcription, translation. Zinc finger motifs are important in transcription factors, which are going to regulate gene expression. So that's why it's going to be important in so many things, because it's such an important component of zinc fingers, which are part of transcription factors, which will bind DNA and affect gene expression. So a lot of issues, deficiency-related growth retardation, dermatitis, immune dysfunction. So there's a variety of things that can be affected related to zinc deficiency. One like this, because it's like so broad, I probably won't ask you about the deficiency symptoms related to zinc. And toxicity is a low risk. So if I'm going to focus you guys that are in class today, I would focus on the function and over 100 enzymes in a wide variety of things, and its function as a zinc finger motif and transcription factors for regulating gene expression. I wouldn't worry too much about deficiency and toxicity for zinc. It's just too broad to really concern yourself with. And toxicity is really low risk. Here's its role in zinc fingers. So this is a zinc finger, and here's the zinc. And this zinc is important in order for our transcription factors to bind DNA. So without this zinc, these transcription factors can't bind DNA, which means they can't regulate gene expression. So its zinc finger is a common motif in proteins that bind DNA. And what are those proteins called? They're called transcription factors. Again, we'll talk about that after the exam a lot more. Fluoride protects against dental caries. And it does this by helping remineralize the enamel. It's an interesting one, a lot of controversy over fluoride. It's a non-essential mineral, but I like to add it to my slides because it's a common one you might get asked about. We do have fluoridated drinking water, and we have found it does reduce cavities in the United States. So pro or against, I don't really care, but you should know this is what we do in the United States. It is in our water, and it has been shown to reduce cavities. We used to have a lot more cavities back in the, I don't know, I guess 60s or whenever it was before they started fluoridating water. So our teeth are actually have been better off. I don't know whether it causes calcification of the pineal gland, but that's really all I want you to know about fluoride. We do use it, and it will help remineralize the enamel, and it does work. But there are concerns that it can increase calcification of your soft tissues, including the pineal gland, which I hear a lot about. Iodine. Iodine needed for thyroid hormones. I don't even care if you remember these guys, thyroxine and triiodothyronine, T4 and T3. I don't even care if you remember these names. Just remember thyroid hormones require iodine. Thyroid hormones regulate metabolism, help your heart, nerves, muscle, everything. So metabolism can be turned up or turned down with thyroid hormones. So these thyroid hormones are going to amp up your metabolism. And if you don't have that, then you're going to be, we'll talk about that, hypo and hyperthyroidism. So food sources, we really just find it with salt, a lot of iodized salt, especially in the United States. And it depends on the soil. So in some countries, they don't have a lot of iodine in the soil, and they don't have a lot of iodized salt, and that's where you see iodine deficiencies. What is the major iodine deficiency? Well, I was going to mention goiter. But yeah, it's hypo and hyperthyroidism. So hypo, low iodine, that's goiter. Actually, hyper can cause goiter as well. But we mainly see it, an early sign of deficiency is goiter. So where's your thyroid gland? That essentially, your thyroid will expand. When you have low iodine, the idea is that your thyroid will swell to try to capture more iodine. And that's why you have the goiter there, because of the location of where the thyroid gland is. In the neck right here. And so essentially it'll swell up and try to capture more iodine if you don't have enough, and that's goiter. So goiter is a result of hyperthyroidism, and this guy, cretinism, I don't know why students didn't remember this one. And cretinism, mental deficiency, stunted growth. So fetal development, if you don't have iodine during fetal development, it causes cretinism. What is cretinism? Cretinism is mental deficiency, stunted growth in that fetus when that baby is born. There's going to be mental deficiencies and stunted growth. And that cretinism is caused by an iodine deficiency during pregnancy. And then there is an autoimmune disease where your thyroid is destroyed, you can't utilize iodine, and that's a Hashimoto thyroiditis. Essentially, it's an autoimmune, your immune system attacks your thyroid gland, and so you can't utilize iodine, can't make your thyroid hormones. And then, so that's Hashimoto, is the hypothyroidism. Hyperthyroidism is Graves' disease. Graves' disease is when you have overproduction, and that can be caused by excess iodine as well. And do I have? So it's essentially you have excessive metabolism, and that's going to have a variety of effects on the body. It's not really fatal so much, but you're going to have a lot of issues related to your metabolism. You won't necessarily, well, it depends on the individual, but like one of the things is the bulging eyeballs. Like that's one of the things it can result in. And I don't know the mechanism behind that, if you need to look that up. But overproduction, it basically throws your homeostasis out of balance. So it has a wide variety of effects. It won't necessarily cause you to lose too much weight, but it could. I think this might be the last one. Selenium. Selenium, important as selenocysteine. Sometimes we call this the 21st amino acid, selenocysteine. But technically, selenocysteine is just a really important molecule in enzymes, including glutathione peroxidase. So cysteine is a really important component of glutathione. Glutathione peroxidase is the enzyme that utilizes glutathione. So selenocysteine is an important component of glutathione peroxidase, which has endogenous antioxidant activity. And it's also important for thyroid hormones, but I'm more concerned that you remember the glutathione because of the antioxidant. You do need to know toxicity is Keshan disease, toxicity is selenosis. So Keshan disease, this is not commonly in the United States because of where we get our food from all over the place. But selenium, just like iodine, is found in the soil. And so if that country doesn't have a lot of imports of food and people are just living off the food that comes out of that ground, if that ground is selenium deficient, it can cause Keshan disease. And essentially your selenoproteins will not be made, and it's specifically a problem with your heart. So you'll have a weakened and enlarged heart with Keshan disease. You see this with animals too. Like if your animals, horses or cows, are grazing out in the field and there's no selenium in the field, then that can kill your animals too. So it's important for livestock as well, or animals in general. But it does weaken and enlarge the heart if you don't have enough selenium in your diet. That's Keshan disease versus selenosis. Selenosis causes like a garlic breath. But essentially too much selenium causes liver damage, neurological problems. I feel like everything has been causing neurological problems. And you don't see it with supplements, you only typically see it with supplements like everything else. But this is an interesting one because Brazil nuts, if you eat too much Brazil nuts on a regular basis, that can actually cause selenosis as well. So Brazil nuts, really high in selenium. You shouldn't eat a lot of them every day for long periods of time. If you eat a big thing of Brazil nuts today, it's not going to kill you. Again, when we're talking about toxicities, it's related to consuming large doses for long periods of time. It's not typically because of an acute dose. Acute doses tend to be your body is able to pee them out or get rid of them, but if you take excess over long periods of time, that's usually what causes the toxicities. Woohoo! All right, 2 o'clock.
Can you stay on that slide for a second?
Yep, I can. Switching around. I know that was still a lot, but it's kind of just the very gist. And so again, I would make a table. I would have like this very general functions, toxicities, deficiencies, special characteristics. This one's found in Brazil nuts. Function, it's really important in production of glutathione and the enzyme glutathione peroxidase. So you can use glutathione as an antioxidant. Cysteine, so it's also selenium is incorporated in cysteine, and that's how it's used in a lot of these enzymes. So cysteine is an important amino acid related to selenium function in the enzymes. All right, so what I want to do quickly is on the board. I'm going to take questions. I also have a bunch of true-false questions that I don't want you to sit here and stress out about. I kind of want you all to just kind of stand up and stop sitting down, and we'll just do these true-false questions. But I want to give you like a 5-minute break before we do that. I mean, we can do a 10-minute break. That's great. Okay. You guys need your breaks. I get it. 10 minutes.
So she would it'd be like
I'm totally like, because that's kind of the idea I was going for with these, because they also have like little things in them. It's just a small artist, but like small things to just make it fun. But I'm also more about, there's someone, a scientist who wants to grow our clothing, who wants to grow our shoes. And I love that idea of how we could just like grow things that we use and then put them back in the ground instead of in them with all these microplastics. And leather for animals, even, yeah. I didn't actually talk about so we I was about to go back to my so we didn't really talk about and I didn't think about that. That was something I didn't worry about anything else.
Actually, yeah. It is possible. I mean, it's things around it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, potassium specifically is related to, especially the heart functions and resting memory. It's a Alright, guys. Yeah, well, whatever you guys want to make of it. But yeah, art review. So what I have available is a bunch of true false statements. And by the way, I have this and the answers, so you don't have to scribble anything down. You can sit back and relax, and we can do it together. I kind of don't want you guys sitting down trying to scramble and write everything down. I think that sometimes you learn best when you're in a passive state and you're relaxed. When you're like trying to remember everything the teacher says, then sometimes you're in this kind of contracted, hyper-focused state, so you're not actually really listening to anything that's being said. You're not learning very well, which is why I have this posted in Blackboard. Not yet, it's not available yet. I'll make it available right after class. But this is just a way for us to kind of like, in a relaxed way, talk about some of these minerals and vitamins, which is just a bunch of true-false statements. And you can sit back and just see how much you might remember. And the answers are going to be on Blackboard, so you can always go back to this and look at the answers. So do you want to do that, or do you guys have any questions first?
That sounds like a good idea to me.
All right, so we're going to just do this, and I'm going to kind of scroll through it. What I want you to do is I'm going to give everyone like 10 seconds, or 5 seconds, to just think about it on your own before you start screaming out the answer. Yeah.
How likely are these to pop up under that?
What?
How likely are these questions related to?
Some of them are probably, I mean, you might see something related. Some of these, yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, no, this isn't the exam. But yeah, will some of this information be seen on the exam? Yeah, probably. It'll probably be, some of these will probably be on the exam. But definitely not all of them. It's just kind of reviewing the general information. All right. Ascorbic acid is important for wound healing and collagen formation. So again, essentially true, false. I'm going to give you a couple seconds before, like, so that everyone can kind of think about what they think the answer is before you spit it out. All right, so what do you think? Is this one true or false? True. So you need ascorbic acid, which is what vitamin? Vitamin C, in order to make collagen. So collagen is important for wound healing. So even if you didn't remember wound healing, you know that collagen is important, and collagen is important for wound healing. And also vitamin C is what? What is another function that might help maintain your body and wound healing and all that? Its function as an antioxidant. So remember, it's a water-soluble antioxidant. What's the lipid-soluble antioxidant that we use? Vitamin E. So again, I don't want you to think quickly. So hopefully everyone's just a relaxed state right now. They're not trying to write all this stuff down. Minoquinone deficiency. So I'm going to read it out. Let you think about it for a second, and then I'll ask some questions about it. Minoquinone deficiency in adults can lead to excessive bleeding or hemorrhage. Who all thinks it's false? No one wants to. Who thinks it's true? It is false. So essentially, we don't really see deficiency, first of all, because your gut bacteria will make enough minoquinone. So we do see hemorrhage in infants, but we're talking about adults here. So in adults, we do not really see deficiency because we have a fully functional liver, and we can make our clotting factors. And by the time we reach adulthood, we have enough vitamin K in our diet, in our body, that we typically just don't see it as a problem. And so, but if we were to talk about newborns, then it would be a different story. But generally speaking, this is absolutely false. We don't have excessive bleeding or hemorrhage related to minoquinone deficiency because we really don't see it. Because we got bacteria to make it. So essentially, this is if you have a newborn, because they don't have bacteria to make it. All right, folate as pyridoxal phosphate is important for protein metabolism and transamination reactions.
False.
How many people think this one's true? How many thinks it's false? All right, why is this false? What is pyridoxal phosphate? Vitamin B6. do have this explained in the answer slide too. So vitamin B6 is pyridoxophosphate. What is folate? What's the scientific name of folate? Tetrahydrofolate. Folic acid is the synthetic name of folate. So we can get folic acid or folate, but both of them, either one we can use to make tetrahydrofolate. And so which one of these folate or tetrahydrofolate is important for protein metabolism and transamination reactions? Transamination reactions require what vitamin? Vitamin B6. You need vitamin B6 for transamination reactions. So if this said vitamin B6, it would be true. If this, instead of folate, it said B6, this whole thing would be true. Otherwise, though, it's false. All right. The UL for niacin B3 was set because it can cause skin flushing. So who all thinks this one is true? True. So it's not really toxic or dangerous, but we do have a UL because like I told you, my friend I was traveling in Turkey with took some B3, took some niacin, and he just turned like this really crazy splotchy red. So the flushing, skin flushing, that's why we have the UL stuff. What is niacin used to treat? Hyperlipidemia. So people with high levels of lipids or cholesterol, they can take niacin, and physicians will prescribe niacin to treat hyperlipidemia. All right, just throwing some other stuff at you that you'll, not necessarily in the exam, just reviewing. All right, riboflavin. Riboflavin toxicity can cause liver damage. Wow, okay. Why is it false? No toxicity. No toxicity related to riboflavin. Excessive intake of thiamine, which is B1, has no known toxicity. I'm just waiting. Does anyone think it's true? You're like, just tell us. False. Yeah, good job, guys. So, thiamine is wait, actually, I'm just confused myself. It is true. What is the one we are all probably thinking of? B6. B6 is the one that we use for premenstrual syndrome. So basically, a lot of women took it and had irreversible nerve damage related to it. This is the only B vitamin that is toxic. So this one is actually true. This is true. Vitamin B1 or thiamine has no known toxicity. B6, that's an interesting characteristic of B6. It's the only B vitamin that has severe toxicity related to it. The other B vitamins do have ULs, but not related to severe toxicity. For example, folate, its UL was set to prevent disguising a B12 deficiency. So not super toxic, but there is a UL. Vitamin C has a UL, not because it's toxic, but because it causes gastrointestinal issues. But this one is true, no known toxicity of thiamine. All right, alpha tocopherol toxicity is rare, but can lead to excessive bleeding, hemorrhaging due to its anticoagulant effects. Who thinks it's true? You guys are right, true. Folate toxicity can lead to nerve damage and gastrointestinal issues. You guys are getting this. False. So folate toxicity, again, I just told you a second ago, there's no folate toxicity. It's not toxic per se. We just don't want too much folate because too much can disguise a B12 deficiency. So that's false. Retinol toxicity can lead to liver damage and birth defects. How many thinks it's true? Okay, true. What is retinol? What vitamin? Vitamin A. And yeah, it can cause severe liver damage, birth defects. It's very toxic in excess amounts. Accutane can cause excess amounts. It can cause birth defects because Accutane is that to treat acne, and it's prescribed in doses way above the RDA. All right, B12. B12 deficiency can result in microcytic anemia due to its requirement for recycling tetrahydrofolate. Wait, was that true or false? Macrocytic anemia. What causes microcytic anemia? Iron deficiency. Iron deficiency causes microcytic. So this is false because it's macrocytic. M-A, macro. So this would be true if this said macro, or it would be true, actually that would only be true. So it would be true if this is macrocytic anemia, but it's false because it says microcytic. And iron is the one that causes microcytic anemia. Do we need B12 to recycle tetrahydrofolate? Yes. All right, the next one, pantothenic acid is involved in fatty acid metabolism as a component of coenzyme A. True. That's really what I want you to remember about pantothenic acid. It can be made into coenzyme A. Deficiency in pyridoxal phosphate can lead to peripheral neuropathy. Here it is. We just talked about that a second ago because I confused it with thiamine B1. True. This is the one where, again, these women took it as the premenstrual syndrome because they didn't like whatever the hot flashes were, all those things with PMS. And so they took whopping doses of pyridoxal phosphate, and they end up with irreversible nerve damage. So that is true. Oh, wait, no, it's false. Why is it false, guys? Because that's a deficiency. It's a toxicity. Toxicity will cause it, not deficiency. So read your questions carefully, people. It is written correctly, and the answers are corrected. It's just I'm going off of my brain, which is not always 100%. But this is false because it's toxicity. If this said toxicity, it would be true. But because it's a deficiency, it's actually false. So again, when you see the answer key will tell you this. It is false because it's toxicity, not deficiency. Read the question carefully. I'm talking to myself now. Oh, this is a good one, I think. Both biotin and vitamin K play a role as coenzymes in carboxylation reactions. So they both do, carboxylation reactions, that is the function of biotin. You also want to remember that in relation to avidin and eggs. But the function of biotin is to act as a coenzyme in carboxylation reactions. So when you want to take pyruvate to make oxaloacetate, you got to carboxylate it. You need biotin for that. Vitamin K, and this is where I wouldn't put this on the exam, because vitamin K is important in carboxylation reactions. That's actually how it's going to make the clotting factors activated. So vitamin K is actually going to allow the clotting factors to be carboxylated. So clotting factors will be carboxylated because of vitamin K, and it's actually that carboxylation that's going to allow them to bind calcium. So that's actually technically true. But I wouldn't have asked this about vitamin K because we didn't really talk about the carboxylation. For vitamin K, you want to know that it's important to produce clotting factors to allow them to bind calcium in order for your blood to clot. But biotin, you should definitely remember, is involved in carboxylation reactions. That is, it's enzymes that have to do carboxylation reactions decarboxylation. What is the what is the vitamin that we need to do decarboxylation reaction? We actually already talked about it. Vitamin B1. So thiamine, this guy does decarboxylation. So decarboxylate. That's that one. So for example, if you want to take pyruvate and convert it to acetyl-CoA, you're taking a 3-carbon, making it into a 2-carbon, you got to decarboxylate. You need thiamine to do that. What? Some of these are on the test, not all of them, but I mean, just know their general function. Biotin, the only function it has is carboxylation reactions. Thiamine, the only function I gave you was decarboxylation reactions. So that's what you should know about thiamine. Decarboxylation enzymes, biotin carboxylation enzymes. I know, try to keep it straight, unlike me, so I get them confused too. But for now, you guys need to remember them. All right, next one. Riboflavin and thiamine are important components for electron carriers, NADH and FADH2. False. What is niacin? What does NADH need? Niacin. What does FADH2 need? Riboflavin. So if this said riboflavin and thiamine, it would be true, but it says riboflavin and thiamine. So if it were just riboflavin and niacin, I don't know why I'm doing this. So the answer, it would be true if it were riboflavin and niacin. But because it said thiamine, this guy is false. So NADH is niacin, FADH2 is riboflavin. All right, we're doing great. This is going well for me, I think. Thiamine pyrophosphate is an important as a coenzyme in decarboxylation reactions. True. Good job, guys. All right, true. Parathyroid hormone is released when blood calcium is high, and one of its functions is to stimulate production of calcitriol. Why is this false? It comes out when calcium is low, exactly, not high. So it's false. But it does, one of its functions is to stimulate the production of active vitamin T, which is calcitriol. So that part is true. The only part that is false is this part. So it actually comes out when calcium is low, not high. So, again, I will have at least one question on parathyroid hormone. All right, next one. Potassium is the major mineral inside of cells needed to maintain membrane potential. True. What's the one that is outside of cells? Sodium. Potassium inside, sodium outside. Ooh, these two are coming together. So this one. Hyponatremia is usually a result of dehydration. It's false. Essentially, hyponatremia is usually a result of what? Water intoxication. Excess water, so water intoxication. And this is sodium. Hyponatremia, Na, that stands for sodium. So when you have basically if you drink too much water, that will dilute your sodium. Hyponatremia means you've diluted your sodium. You have too little sodium. And what causes too little sodium? Too much water. If you drink a gallon of water in a very short period of time, your kidneys don't have time to excrete the excess water, which means your sodium's going to be diluted, and that could potentially be fatal. So, either what? I think your brain swells, and so you probably lose sense of feeling, like your neurons aren't working very well. So, like your pain neurons even probably. So I would say it's probably not, which makes it worse. If some pain is something that tells you something's wrong, but if your body doesn't feel pain, sometimes you don't know it. Especially when your brain swells. There was a woman who was skiing and she fell and hit her head, didn't think twice about it. No one could find her the next morning. Apparently, over the night, her brain swelled and she just died in her sleep. So when your brain swells, you don't feel pain about that. You don't have pain receptors in your brain, or nociceptors. Yeah, so this one is false because it should be water intoxication, not dehydration. Dehydration means too little water. In this case, hyponatremia is caused by excess water, water intoxication. All right, next one. Calcium, sodium, potassium are all important for muscle contraction and neuron signaling. Thank goodness. So calcium, sodium, potassium. You guys are going to be manipulating the nervous system. You should know that these are important electrolytes for neuron signaling. You need all three of these. And for calcium and for muscle contraction. Neuron signaling and muscle contraction. You need all these guys. Transferrin stores excess iron in the liver, whereas ferritin transports it. False. Why is it false? Transferrin is the one that transports, whereas ferritin is the one that stores. Selenium is an important component of peroxidases, which oxidize iron for storage or transport. False. What is the important component of peroxidases? Copper. Copper. So this would be true if it said copper. Both selenium and copper are important minerals that assist in the movement of electrons through the electron transport chain. False. What two are important? Copper and iron. So this will be true if it said iron and copper. Wilson's disease causes Kaiser-Fleischer rings as a result of copper overload, whereas Menkes disease is a result of copper deficiency, and both can lead to neurological issues. That's really the gist of what you need to know about copper deficiency and overload. Wilson's disease is the overload, whereas Wilson's disease is overload, Menkes disease is deficiency, and the overload, you can see the Kaiser-Fleischer ring, the accumulation of copper in the iris. Selenium is an important component of endogenous glutathione peroxidase antioxidant. True. Along with cysteine, the amino acid. So this is true. Iron deficiency results in pernicious anemia. False. What results in pernicious anemia? B12. And it's usually related for the inability to make what in the stomach? Intrinsic factor. So essentially, if you can't make intrinsic factor, you can't absorb B12. And if you can't absorb B12, you can't recycle folate. So folate needs B12, otherwise you will end up with anemia. So it's specifically, it's still megaloblastic, and so it's still going to be macrocytic, also known as megaloblastic. So macrocytic and megaloblastic are the same thing, megaloblastic. This type of anemia is both caused by a folate and a B12 deficiency. But it's specific, if it's only a B12 deficiency, then oftentimes we just call it pernicious anemia. And that usually is related to the fact that as we get older, we tend to make less intrinsic factor, which means we don't absorb B12 very well, which means a lot of elderly tend to have B12 deficiencies. Iodine toxicity can lead to cretinism. False. Why is that false? Deficiency. And during pregnancy, if you don't have iron or iodine during pregnancy, it will lead to cretinism in the infant, in the child. And that basically they have slow development, essentially. Okay, last one. Copper is necessary for stabilizing AP for its hydrolysis.
False.
False, exactly. What is important for stabilizing ATP? Magnesium. It's important in those kinase reactions, magnesium, to stabilize the ATP so we can use it properly. Not copper, it's magnesium. All right, the answers, I'm going to actually unwrite it. It's in Blackboard, but I'm going to unwrite it now so you guys can look at this and review it later if you want to. But I'm just going to So you'll find it, I think it's in week 7. You'll find it in week 7. So I just unhid it. So, all right, there are 10 minutes left. What do you guys want to do? Do you guys want to sleep, relax, ask questions? I'm not giving exam questions. If you study, I know there's a lot of lectures, so just kind of focus in on the stuff that we talked about, though. And you have the review lectures, your exams on Tuesday, yeah. Honestly, I don't know if anyone looked at that. Okay, let me fix that head. I've never looked at that. I don't know, like I'm assuming everyone's feeling. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I was curious about that.
Are you staying for micro?
Yes.
Would you mind sending me the quick?
Yes, I will.
You
You headed to the library?
I'm gonna go to my house and do something osteoporotic.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I'm going to be here. I'm just going to be working on cards and things like that. I'm giving one set to her, and then you and I can do it on the weekend.
Flash each other.
It's going to be really text heavy. Pretty much as much information as we can. Get on the card at once.
How many are?
I'm going to make one for each